While addressing content in our classrooms is important, it's also vital to realize that our schools are a place of community and culture. Today, I talked to 2020 Hawaii State Teacher of the Year, Chung, about what it means to bring community and culture into virtual spaces. Welcome to Focus on K-12, EdTech and the Education Experience. I'm your host, Doug Konopelko, Education Strategist at CDWG. So let's dive in as we focus on K-12.
Hi everyone, my name is Cecilia Chung, or Cece, and I'm an educator at Honolulu Middle School on Oahu, Hawaii. I'm also part of the Hawaii Society for Tech and Education and just really excited to be here today.
Thanks for being on, Cece. You've been highlighted with the ISTE Making It Happen Award. Most recently, you are the 2020 Hawaii Teacher of the Year. So as someone who's impacting teachers and students on a large scale while still maintaining the classroom role, what's something that you've really been focusing on lately?
You know, Doug, I thought about this question for a while and I was trying to think to myself, there's so many things that I want to talk about with you, honestly, if I had all the time in the world. But I started to think about sort of this year and the weight that a lot of us, I think, are feeling, and when we think about this weight and we put that pressure on ourselves, we start to ask, what is the priority? What are some things as teachers we really want to focus on? And so I'd really like to talk about community building and community building in a virtual space. Can that happen? How does that look? And, I'm even curious, like what other educators are thinking after this podcast goes out. So what do our kids need? That was kind of the big thing with community building.
So after teaching then in the virtual environment, which you've been in for quite a while now, can you share what you mean when you say like building community or bringing community into a virtual space, and then what does that look like so far?
Yeah, so when I think community building and culture building, I'm really thinking about the questions of, do students feel safe in this place? Do they feel that they belong? Is it a sense of family and community that they can go to? We know that students are experiencing trauma right now in a way that we're still beginning to understand. Even prior to the pandemic, some students viewed school as the main hub or the place of safety and where they could find that care and love. And what does that look like now? And when I thought about it, virtual spaces, it's different, but we can still build that sense of community and culture, and it should be our priority, And I also thought about, are we intentionally planning with our students in mind? And are we intentionally having our systems lead to outcomes where students are loved and feel like they're part of a school community or family? Do our decisions, like our daily decisions, reflect this? And so those are a lot of the questions that I thought about. Is my classroom a place of safety and belonging, a place that they want to be, even if it's a virtual space, right? And at the end of the day, what's the most important? And I think the most important thing is student well-being, healthy minds and healthy hearts, and they can feel like this is a place they want to be.
Yeah, really appreciate that. So you had to take a little different approach this year, right? Obviously, in building that community and culture, which has been so important in your classroom. So what has that looked like?
So it's been really different. And I think a lot of the things that I was trying to, in the first few weeks, I was really trying to replicate some of the things I did in the physical classroom. All of those strategies in my teacher toolbox I was pulling out in the virtual world and quickly learning, as most of us did, that they don't work like as that well or in the same way, right? And so I had to think about the idea of not just replicating things, but reimagining things. Like, what could this new teacher toolbox look like in the virtual world? How can we improve on it, and how can we make it better? So a few things that came to mind is that I just really had to step back. So if I could just pick out three things that really resonated with me this past few months, is step back, let go, and listen. So stepping away, literally and figuratively, away from the screen and taking time to process as educators is really important, whether it's processing with a colleague or processing by yourself in a journal. Just kind of understanding what's happening, what's working and what's not working, I think was really critical for me. The second thing was to just let go, letting go of this kind of control and letting go of the fact that some lessons will flop and they won't work out the way you'd like them to, right? And forgiving yourself and modeling that kind of forgiveness for kids. The last one really was to listen, and that's the most important, I think, out of all. Really listening to students. And when I say listen, I truly mean genuinely listening, not just pretending to listen or putting out a survey and thinking that like just having them fill out a form, using that actual feedback. Because as tough as our days are as teachers, these kids are facing myriads of challenges that we don't truly understand yet. And to shift the way that we're teaching in a way that helps students, we need to listen to our kids because they have so many great things to say, so many important things to say. And as a teacher, I realized we need to make intentional times in our day to listen. And even if that means picking up a conversation that happens in the middle of a lesson, or if that student feedback, this was the hardest part for me, if that feedback makes you put a mirror to yourself and you're like, oh, wait, I don't do that, or I'm not, that's not where I'm at. So yeah, those are kind of the main three things that came to mind.
Yeah, and I think when we talk about listening to our students and working with our students, right, we kind of end up at student agency, right? And that idea of voice and choice. So I think student agency is one of those that's so much more than just a buzzword, right? So what role does student agency, listening, voice and choice really have in your room?
Yeah, I think student agency is really important because when we think student voice or just listening to the kids, it's much more than just listening, it's the action. And it's also the fact that kids feel that their voice and their choices and their actions matter and they can do something about it. So when I started listening to the kids about what they miss the most or what they wish was different, what they wish they could do more of in this virtual world, all of them said that they miss having friends, they miss talking to each other. And I realized that a lot of the get to know you things that we did in the beginning of the year, it just wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to pull them into like a community. So I had to really change my practice and listen to them. So what I also do is I send out a feedback form after the lesson. And I don't know if you've heard of the 3 A's, a really awesome teacher shared it with me, but you share an appreciation, an apology, or an aha moment that you've had. And on that form, I also attached what can Ms. Chung do to make her lessons more engaging, more relevant, more challenging? And so I just took a lot of that feedback to heart. So when they were talking about missing their friends, I had to change my practice just like I'm changing my practice with those forms and showing the kids that your voice is not just me saying, oh, tell me how you feel. It's me saying, tell me how you feel and what can we actually do about it? So for the virtual classes, I started to save the 5 to 10 minutes before class started as just a free time. And I think I was mentioning this to another teacher the other day, but it took me a couple weeks to realize that on their Google Meet grid, when the kids view, the lesson, they're really only seeing my face or they're only seeing the slideshow. And so what happens is they don't feel like a part of a community of other peers and other students, right? So one thing that I also had to change was I told the kids that I said vulnerably, I can't believe that's what's been happening this whole time. You've just been staring at my face the whole time. So I presented my screen to the screen with all of the faces of the kids, and I just let them talk because I needed to realize I need to let go of the control of that virtual setting or situation. And we got to think about where are relationships built. Sometimes they can be built intentionally through activities, but relationships are often built at recess, right? In the in-between moments, and the moments where kids are passing each other, making jokes, or even arguing with each other. So it's not often when the teacher is right in your face and facilitating or talking to them. So the big thing for me was let kids be kids. Let them talk about the latest viral video. Let them talk about their dogs. They're showing them to you in the cameras anyway. They want to show it to their peers. Let them make jokes and even let them remember what awkward silence feels like. Because I think that the virtual setting, it can be real. It is real, right? But we got to give them that space for it. And the other thing I thought about too, Deborah, I'm getting really into this right now because I thought about community, right? Like what is community? And community, it's different for every community. It's whoever makes that community up. And if your classes are made up of students, each of them are so special and unique in their own ways. How do we bring them to kind of like be comfortable with themselves and even explore who they are, right? Their own student identities, their people, their person identities. And when they bring all of those identities into the space, what kind of culture can we build together? It's not just teacher telling students or teacher facilitating a class. It's giving kids the venue to just be themselves, but also take initiative and take control of like certain things, or tweaking your lesson, or having them lead projects, right? I've seen this modeled in so many different ways all across the nation when I'm looking on Twitter. Lots of great educators doing that kind of work.
Yeah. So, what are some of the things that you've pulled into your practice, right? So, when we talk about community building, that you've pulled into your practice around community building and in your classroom that you feel like you had seen others using, right? That seemed effective. And what did that look like when it played out in your room?
Yeah, so for me, I really had to lend a lot of time for them to get to know each other. And so as I think the hardest thing is time, right? However much time you have in your virtual class setting, that's been the toughest for me. Kind of like thinking to yourself, here's my pacing guide, or here's what I intended for the week, but allowing yourself to pause and say, this isn't the priority right now. If the kids truly want to have deep discussions later on in social studies, then they need to be comfortable and know each other and know that this is a place of intellectual safety and a place of emotional safety. So I've had to pause my lesson, and we'll do things like a community circle where each person might share something about themselves. And it's hard. I have 30 some kids in one virtual class, and it does take time. But I know that the students really appreciate that time to get to know each other, because now they know each other's names. I know that sounds silly, but if you're in a class of 30 and you only see 5 screens and a slideshow, there's not much time to get to know each other at a level where you can talk to them like, as yourself. So that was a really important one, is just making the time to do it. Really helped the situation for me as a teacher.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting when we think about the concept of having enough time, right? And that's one thing that I see people go back to all the time in their classes, right? And they talk about, well, we didn't have enough time for X, so we did Y. And I think that what you're saying and what I'm hearing and is what I'd love for a lot of teachers to hear, is that the most important thing for that day isn't page 87, right? It's how are we impacting our students. And so I want to thank you for your time and taking the time to talk to us today, and just keep fighting the good fight out there and bringing that community into the classroom.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Doug.
Thanks for joining us today on Focus on K-12 EdTech and the Education Experience. If you enjoyed today's show, please feel free to like, subscribe, and click the little bell so that you get notified whenever we post a new episode. If you have an idea for a future guest, or just want to talk about the show, either post something in the comments below or reach out to me on Twitter at @dconopelco. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time as we focus on K-12.